Welcome everybody. Mike Griffith here in studio. It's week 0, sort of, right? Miami and Florida on Saturday night. I know all the Georgia fans are going to be watching to see how the Gators do. They're a 7-point favorite over the Miami Hurricanes, and what do we take away from that football game? I'm still waiting to find out if Brenton Cox is going to be eligible for the Florida Gators. Remember, Dan Mullen said he would file an appeal. Haven't heard anything yet. Can't imagine Brenton Cox being suited up for that game. But then again, I couldn't imagine him at Florida Fan Day within 7 days of when he was at Georgia Fan Day. So, week 0 starts. For Georgia football, what does that mean? Well, we had our final scrimmage last Saturday, and I actually met a staffer in the hallway before Kirby came in, and he was really excited. He said, today went better. There was a lot of relief in Athens because Kirby Smart is off the warpath for right now. The guy that we saw after Scrimmage 1 was ticked off with a capital T and ready for some heads to roll. Called the performance lethargic. Did not mention Jake Fromm's name in the 16 minutes and 2,800 words that he spoke. Now, how upset is Kirby Smart if he's not calling out Jake Fromm for praise? I don't know if I've ever heard or seen that happen before, but that was the case. And so we all kind of wondered, how would Jake Fromm and how would this first-team offense respond in scrimmage number 2? Because Stetson Bennett, who you just saw there a moment ago, number 13, the backup quarterback, he's not supposed to beat the number 1 defense. Jake Fromm is not supposed to struggle against the number 2 defense. But that's what happened in scrimmage 1. And Kirby said he wanted to see how they would respond. Otherwise, I imagine some of those second-team guys would become first-team guys and vice versa. Thank goodness for everyone in Athens. Thank goodness for everyone in that Georgia football facility, the Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall, that the Bulldogs came up big in the second scrimmage. Some names that we heard called out. I want to start out with Kenny McIntosh. You know, at DawgNation, we try to get out and see all the recruits that we possibly can, and certainly you know that Jeff Sentell is seemingly everywhere. Every time we turn around, Jeff is providing some great insight into some recruits. But I drew the assignment, the next generation assignment, of going down to South Florida to meet with Kenny McIntosh. You're seeing some of those pictures that I took, did some videos. The story within the story that you don't know, and I'll share it here today, is that Kenny McIntosh probably did 6 stand-ups with me so that we could get 2 videos. Because I was having some equipment problem. There were some issues with some of the lighting and other videos, and we would go back, and let me tell you, Kenny McIntosh is a perfectionist. All right, he's the younger brother of R.J. McIntosh, who's a defensive lineman with the New York Giants, and Dwan Mathis, who is now up at Washington State. But some of this footage you're seeing from Kenny's gym, this is him working out as he prepared to come to Georgia. This is at the end of a 2-hour workout, by the way. When I said, hey, Kenny, can you jump on the bench and give me some reps? This kid's worked out for 2 hours in the Florida heat, and he gets on the bench and knocks out, I don't know what you saw there, 8 or 9 reps at 225. Which some guys don't do on pro day when they leave a program. I can't tell you how impressed I was with Kenny and his family and the way they welcomed DawgNation in there. And look, it's not about Mike Griffith. It's not about DawgNation. It's about Georgia fans, okay? Kenny did those interviews because he understood that there were a lot of Georgia fans that wanted to know more about him. He hadn't done a whole lot of interviews, and I remember Jeff telling me, hey, he's kind of a mystery man. We don't know what you're going to get when you go down there because Kenny hasn't really talked to anyone, but he follows DawgNation. They read our website, and they like the work that we've done, and so they let me in their home to do these interviews with Kenny. And what a perfectionist, what a pro, what a polite young man. And so when you're in our business, people always say, well, who do you root for? Who's your favorite team? Mike, you covered this team. You went to Michigan State. You covered Alabama. You covered Auburn. Who do you go for? Who do you root for? Listen, here's how it works. You really don't root for teams, but you meet people along the way that you can't help but root for. And Kenny McIntosh is a guy, after spending some time with him and his family, I want to see him do well. The guy is all in. He kind of got dissed by Ohio State and Alabama. Alabama pulled his visit the week of the Alabama-Auburn game. They told him they were going to give him a ticket to go to that game. They pull it. They quit calling. Ohio State was leaning on him to commit. He doesn't commit when they want, so they move on to somebody else and get a commitment from somebody else. And that's why a guy like Kenny McIntosh was available at the end of the day when Georgia's looking to find that back. Kenny had kind of had an affinity for Georgia already because Sony Michel is from South Florida, and Sony is a guy that Kenny McIntosh looks up to. That was why you saw him in that number 1 jersey, right? He saw Sony wearing it. And I'll tell you, the real value of that isn't just that he saw Sony Michel do great things in the Super Bowl for the Patriots after playing at Georgia. The real value is that Kenny McIntosh is a student of the game. I'll tell you another secret about Kenny McIntosh. He watches a lot of film. He'll pull his phone out and literally be looking at clips of different running backs, okay? So when you see Kenny do all these spins and cuts and moves, I'm convinced it's because of his film study. And I really liken his ability to Le'Veon Bell. And I covered Le'Veon at Michigan State. Le'Veon was considerably bigger at Michigan State. Le'Veon was 242 when he played for the Spartans. He's since cut to 224. But when I watch Kenny run, and remember, he's very young. He's only 18 years old. He's going to gain weight. I don't know if you saw the quote from his high school coach, Daniel Luque. He says Kenny's going to turn into the Incredible Hulk when he starts conditioning year-round, because Kenny played basketball all the way through school at University School. They had one of the top basketball programs in the country. So he also played basketball and wasn't really in that football conditioning program year-round. Now he's going to be in that program. I think that's why Kenny looked stronger at the end of fall drills, where a lot of other guys are kind of dropping off a little bit. Kenny McIntosh is getting stronger because he's at a training table, because he's in the Georgia Strength and Conditioning program, and he's doing it year-round for the first time. So this is a guy to keep an eye on. And if you're a Georgia fan right now, you've got to be excited, because we're sitting here opening the segment a week before the season, effectively talking about the 5th string running back. That tells you how good the rest of the room is. We already knew this, right? We already know about DeAndre Swift, okay? A couple words on DeAndre Swift. So last week, DeAndre Swift was late coming out to practice last Tuesday. And when you're a reporter, you go to these practices and you do these practice reports. You go out to practice. You want to take role. Who's there? Who's not there? Is anybody wearing a brace? Does Kirby sound particularly agitated? Are there any coaches that are grinding on a group? Are you hearing any messages? What can you convey in that time that you're out there? Well, what we all conveyed was that number 7 wasn't out there. And where the heck is he? Now, fortunately, I was standing behind some NFL scouts, and I heard one scout say to the other one, "Hey, where's Swift?" And another one says, "Oh, Kirby says, or Coach says, he's going to be out after the media leaves." Now, why would Swift be out after the media leaves? Could he have been getting more treatment? Remember, DeAndre told us just a couple weeks ago, he lives in the training room. That's not a negative, by the way. When you've had double groin surgery, when you've had turf toe, when you've had an ankle injury like DeAndre Swift had last year, when you move like DeAndre Swift, I mean, we're talking explosive, dynamic, fast twitch cuts. Barry Sanders-like change of directions from DeAndre Swift, okay? He's got to take care of his body. He's going to spend time in the training room. It's not a bad thing. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of maturity. It's a sign of knowledge. Now, that said, you wonder about DeAndre's durability from week to week. If one scrimmage put him in the training room late on a Tuesday or a Monday, what's it going to be like after the Vandy game? What's it going to be like after Arkansas State? What's it going to be like after Murray State? What's it going to be like after Notre Dame? Let's be real. Notre Dame is the game we're going to see a lot of number 7, okay? You might see a bit of them against Vanderbilt, but I wouldn't think more than 15 touches. I think Notre Dame is a coming-out party for DeAndre. I think that's when he jumps the Heisman watch. You already know he's on these Heisman lists. In the meantime, you got other backs, but I guess my point before I close on DeAndre Swift is I don't know what we're going to get from week to week. And when we do these training reports, the other point I would make is this. Remember, it is a practice observation. That's what we're there to do. I had some people say, "Oh, you're making way too much Brian Herring being number 1 in the drills, moving ahead." No, that's not me that did it. Okay, there's a chart, and those guys line up in order for a reason. And part of it's that Brian Herring has worked very hard, by the way. And, oh, by the way, you might see more Brian Herring than DeAndre Swift the first 3 weeks of the season. Brian Herring right now is a borderline Senior Bowl invite. And let me tell you what I mean by that. He is on the Senior Bowl radar. I talk to the executive director of the Senior Bowl regularly. His name is Jim Nagy. He's a former NFL scout with the New England Patriots, the Seattle Seahawks. He knows the Southeast region. He's been to like 6 Super Bowls, something ridiculous. Like, the guy's good. That's why he's in charge of the Senior Bowl. Brian is on the radar. Now, remember, Brian has limited film the first 3 years. You know, when he's been in there, he's been very good. In fact, Brian was the premier short yardage third down back for Georgia last year. He was the most effective guy. Not Swift, not Holyfield. Brian Herrien. Brian is going to fight for his carries. Brian is going to fight for his career. The whole thing's been a fight for Brian. I learned a lot about Brian in a roundabout way this spring via a practice report I did. And the more that I learned about Brian Herrien, the more I was impressed. And the more I believe that when you've invested as much as Brian Herrien has, it's going to be hard for somebody to take it away. He ain't going to give it up. Brian's not going to have a bad day at work, okay? He's not going to be a guy that Kirby Smart's going to talk to about going harder. And like I said, right now, he finished last week number 1 going through drills ahead of Swift. Now, I'm not saying that means he's going to start, that he's going to jump Swift on the highs. It is what it is. It means that Brian Herrien was working ahead of Swift, just like Holyfield was after week 4 last year. Elijah Holyfield outworked him in practices. Kirby's going to reward guys that work hard. So I don't know who's going to line up number 1 at practice. I don't know what you want to make of it. I don't know what the coaches want to make of it. But I'm going to report what I see. And it's up to you to interpret, okay? I'm going to tell you who's running first team at receiver, who are the first 3 guys out there, who's the first team offensive line. I'm going to look and see who the linebackers are. And I'm going to tell you who's number 1 in the running back line. Now, again, that's up to your interpretation as a reader, whether or not you want to believe that means anything. I'll tell you what it means to me, though. What my educated opinion tells me is that Brian Herrien has been a leader in that running backs room, and Kirby Smart went out of his way to mention Brian Herrien when I asked about DeAndre Swift's health. That tells me everything. So let's not look at it as a knock on DeAndre Swift, because we do know that DeAndre's had an injury history, and we do know that DeAndre is going to manage his body closely. Let's look at that as a compliment for Brian Herrien and how much work he's done. He's not getting a lot of fanfare. He's not the first team All-American. He's not on a Heisman list. He's not in the, we're watching Zamir White run over people. He's just getting it done. He's a lunch pail guy. I think Georgia fans, make sure when you talk about this great backfield, which I believe is the best backfield in college football, make sure you leave room in your conversation for number 35 and Brian Herrien, because there's a lot to be said for the guys that come to work every day and do it without the fanfare, and that's what I've seen Brian Herrien do in the last year and a half. I've been very impressed with him. Now, for the guy that we all know goes viral, every time I put him in a headline, is Zamir White. Listen, I was chief among the skeptics when Zamir was going through this rehabilitation through a second ACL. I can't tell you how many people, how many players I've seen that are different when they come back from an ACL or an ankle or a shoulder. And I'm thinking, man, these Zamir White videos, this kid is putting so much pressure on himself, because every time he would put out a workout video, the internet would explode in the off season. And I just say, man, folks, relax, give Zamir time. There was a method to his madness. And Jake Fromm kind of let us know that in Hoover at the SEC Media Days when we asked about Zamir. And he said, we're going to let Zamir be Zamir. He does that for a reason. That was Zamir White's way of putting pressure on himself to perform well in fall camp. And I must say that it has worked to this point. He's gotten through 2 scrimmages. He's not wearing a knee brace. Thank goodness, because I'm not a fan of the knee brace on a running back. I hate to see it. I don't think it's, to me, running backs, I was a high school running back. They're like racehorses, man. You can't put a brace on a running back. That's the saddest thing you can see. It's like seeing a brace on a cheerleader. All the action they got to do, the jumping, the running, the cutting. If you're wearing a knee brace, you shouldn't be out there cheering. You shouldn't be out there playing running back. That's my 2 cents, right? So it's great to see Zamir out there without a knee brace. Even better, watching these drills. So Scrimmage 1, he trucks Channing Tindall. Channing Tindall is a tough guy. Channing Tindall is a guy for Georgia that goes down on kickoffs and blows people up as a true freshman. And you get hit by Channing Tindall, you know it. Okay, but there's Channing lowering the pads, and Zamir just kind of glances off him. Channing goes down like, dude, he just ran through Channing Tindall. It's one drill, though. It's one drill. This week, now I see something 0. I don't think it's Malik Herring because it looked like linebackers against running backs. That's Tate Crowder. Now we're talking about Tate Crowder, another Senior Bowl guy, right? Another guy on that watch list. Why the Senior Bowl is so important, by the way, 85% of the people go to Senior Bowl get drafted. That tells you you're an NFL player if you get invited to that. Here's Tate Crowder now. Here's 235 Tay, former running back. Tay knows what Zamir did to Channing the week before, and now he's got a clean shot on him in drills. Guess what? He runs through Tate Crowder. This is your starting linebacker, middle linebacker at Georgia. And oh, by the way, that was Eli Wolf, the transfer from Tennessee, providing the lead block. Keep an eye out for Eli Wolf, a guy that Kirby sent out to talk to the media. That's usually a telegraph. Coach likes what he's doing, okay? But watching Zamir in those drills really impressed me. And it made me think, and this is good competition. Brian loves it as much as anybody. Brian's going to have competition on short yardage carries. Brian's going to have competition for goal line carries. This is good. This is not bad. Everybody gets better. Running backs, they have a lot of respect for one another. So we've talked about Kenny McIntosh. We've talked about DeAndre Swift. We've talked about Brian Herrien. We've talked about Zamir White. And you know who might be, at the end of the day, the guy who gets more yards than anybody in the backfield is James Cook. Now, I'm going to put this caveat in there. That's including return yardage. Because I think James Cook, formerly number 6, now number 4, I think James Cook is going to be on kick return, maybe even punt return. I'm not sure how he is fielding punts. I haven't seen that yet. Kirby hasn't talked a lot about that. Thank you for the video there. It looks just fine to me, taking that catch right there. That's James Cook last year wearing number 6. Obviously, Kenny McIntosh in that number now. Cook has gotten bigger. Cook has gotten stronger. Cook has impressed the head coach. More coach speak, more Kirby interpretation for you. When a head coach says that player has really matured, that's a way of saying he's going to play this year. That's a way of saying he's taking care of business. We're going to see James Cook. I don't know how, I don't know when. I would guess on the special teams. I would guess as a receiver out of the backfield. I would guess getting carries. And at the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if James Cook has more total yardage when you include the return yardage than any other player on the football team. I think he's an absolute weapon. I was excited about him when I saw him in Scrimmage last year. I loved his film from South Florida. Electric is the word. Kirby Smart has used it. The juice that he has. J.R. Reed talking about he's hard to touch. Okay, J.R. Reed is an NFL safety. If J.R. would have gone pro, he would have gone in the first 3 rounds last year. He came back. He's a first-team All-American. And J.R. Reed says James Cook is hard to touch. He doesn't say he's hard to tackle. He doesn't say he's hard to catch. He says he's hard to touch. So he talked about how Cook gets that corner and can go tightrope the sideline. Listen, I didn't necessarily plan on starting the show talking about these running backs, but I have. And you can tell I love this Georgia backfield. And then everybody else is sitting back, getting giddy, going, and the best thing is that the best offensive line is in front of them. Yes, it is. It's amazing, isn't it? Cade Mays, number 6, maybe number 5. I don't know. Is he going to beat out Ben Cleveland for right guard? Jamari Salyer, he's going to be available to the media today. Is he number 7? Okay. Is there any team in the country with 7 better offensive linemen than Georgia? No. Answer, no. Could Jamari and Cade start on just about any other offensive line in the country? 99.5% of them. No doubt in my mind. That's how good the quote-unquote Great Wall really is. So it's a lot to be excited about as we wrap up fall camp. You know, I wanted to review it. This is typically when you talk about injuries, okay? So where is Georgia at on the injury front right now? They're in great shape. We know that Nakobe Dean did not scrimmage last Saturday. Nakobe's the 5-star. I don't think he's going to start. I think it's Monty and Tay, but I think we're going to see Nakobe in there. I know Dan Lanning and Glenn Schumann have worked hard with that linebacking core. I think that's going to be the most improved unit on the team this season will be the linebacking core. I think you're going to see a quantum leap in the performance and the plays that are made, particularly now that George has taken this havoc approach where they want to force turnovers. That means more blitzes. That means more multiple fronts. That means more confused offensive lines and more quarterbacks getting hit in the back of the head. Okay, this linebacking core doesn't play. Nakobe is number 3 as an inside linebacker. and he's going to play a lot. I've been told that he has a high ankle sprain. We'll see if he's back at practice today. Again, another guy you don't need to rush, right? Kirby's not going to start Vanderbilt preparation until Wednesday at the earliest, maybe Thursday. So Nakobe's got a couple more days. And truthfully, if he's really not ready, they're not going to take any chances, I don't think, for Vandy. But that's a guy to keep an eye on. Two other very, very important guys to keep an eye on are two of these senior defensive linemen. If the group that I would say we're the most concerned about for Georgia is still the defensive line. Even though there's 5 or 6 seniors on the defensive line, you don't have that one guy that you circle, the Quinnen Williams guy, right? The Dexter Lawrence guy. You don't have that first-round pick. Now, Jordan Davis is a sophomore, and I think he's a year away from that. But I don't know about his endurance and how many snaps in a row he can go yet. He's a really big dude. You know, you saw him dunk in those videos that we put out from Camp Sunshine. He's 6'5", 340, and the guy can dunk. He's a phenomenal athlete. He was a freshman All-American. He's as close to star power as you got. But really, you look across that line, and it's kind of a, you know, who are these guys, right? Now, Georgia fans know who they are, but outsiders really don't. Who really knows who Malik Herring is? You know, he was a big-time recruit, but what has he really done at Georgia? I don't think he's had the impact yet. I think number 10, Malik Herring, is a guy to keep an eye on. I think he's a potential breakout player. I know that Kirby has pushed really hard and called Malik out, and that when the coach is calling you out, that's a good thing. You saw some clips there at number 52. That's Tyler Clark. You know, I actually asked Clark at the autograph line, I said, how come you never talk to the media, man? And he just kind of gave me a look. Guess what? Today he's going to be talking to the media. So you're going to see a Tyler Clark story later. I'm excited about that. He's a warrior. He's a warhorse. He's a guy that's been in the trenches for a long time. I hope he has a breakout season. I've been told that Tyler may not have been 100% last year. Let's hope he's 100% this year, and he can do what he does along with Malik Herring, who you're seeing right there, number 10. An impressive young man off the field, by the way. Held like an off-season camp for kids and people in his hometown. He's a guy that's ready to give back to his community, but first he needs to give to his team this year. They need Malik Herring to step up. So the two injuries that I'm getting to in this very roundabout way, Julian Rochester is a senior. He's coming off an ACL injury, which apparently he suffered against Texas. We didn't know that at the time. There you see Julian, number 5. He was hoping to break out last year. Didn't really have the kind of season that he wanted, I don't think. A guy that I think was hoping to have a very good senior season. Still can. We'll find out where he's at. He's only kind of been going through about half the drills, Kirby said. And the other guy is David Marshall. And David may be the best run-stopping defensive lineman that Georgia has. Now, he's listed. I want to see if they still list David as an outside linebacker that they would walk up to the line, 6'3", 274. No, they've got him as an end now. He could be the premier run stopper for Georgia. David had the Liz Frank surgery that involves the midfoot. He's another guy like Julian that's been about 50% going through these fall drills, not really turned loose yet. These are guys, Julian and David, that need to be back for the stretch drive in October and November. That's championship drive. You know, you got to break the season down into 3. So you kind of got the warm-up month here. You know, you got the road game against Vandy, which is not one to be taken for granted. It's under the lights in the SEC against the coach that's going to sell out to stop the run and make Jake Fromm throw the football. We're going to see that pass game tested early. And then you got the walkover games, Murray State, Arkansas State. And then you got the grand finale of September against Notre Dame, the most expensive ticket in college football, most anticipated game for quite some time. I'm from the Midwest. Notre Dame's old hat for me. I shrug my shoulders. Notre Dame. It's a big deal down here, though. They don't come to Georgia often. I know Georgia fans are going to be excited to watch Georgia beat up Notre Dame. And then they get the bye week. Right? And now comes the championship drive, right? Then you got to go to Tennessee and Knoxville and on and on and on into November. So to me right now, if you're looking at Georgia, you focus on September. I think this team's in really good shape. I think they're ready. And I'm going to take some of your questions right now. I've talked more than I planned on. But Michael Carvello, this is what happens. When I start talking about running backs, I can go on and on. I've really been fortunate to cover a lot of great running backs in my career. And Georgia is just an eyeful. Guys I've covered, Sean Alexander, Le'Veon Bell, Jamal Lewis, Arian Foster. Stephen Davis was a pretty good back at Auburn back in the day. So was James Bostic. Alvin Kamara obviously doing some good things. So I've seen some really great backs up front, up close. Barry Sanders I covered in college. And the Georgia backs, I got to tell you, they really excite me. I mean, they're almost like superheroes. They all have their different superpowers in what they do. And I respect all of them. And I can't wait to watch them run the ball this year. By the way, want to thank Ingles for the sponsorship. You see the graphic, the Ingles on the Beat segment. Couldn't do this without them. They stand behind me. I appreciate that. Try and bring you the best content. Certainly, they bring you the best products daily at Ingles. I look here at the comments, and I see Clarence Dawson. Clarence, one of the top fans today. Vandy will be a good game, tougher than one might think. I do think it will be a physical game, and I do think that Vanderbilt will stay with Georgia for a half. I really do. Because, listen, Kirby's not going to go out there throwing the ball around the park. It's just not going to happen. I just don't think it's impressed enough at this point where he's going to become a pass first to set up the run kind of team. You know, I think Eric Zier, the great Eric Zier, once the all-time leading passer in the SEC, by the way. I think Zier had it right when he talked about the run and how that sets up the pass. And I think Kirby talked about it after Scrimmage 1 when he said, we're a team that leans on you. You know, I think we saw when Georgia tried to pass to set up the run in Scrimmage 1, it didn't work. Don't think the head coach is sold on it. So, and this is a good thing. That's not a bad thing if you're run first. It's not a bad thing to be a power football team. I think that's how you can win a championship at Georgia. I think that's playing to your strength. So because Georgia will take a patient approach in that manner, because they're going to pound the ball, so come the third and the fourth quarter, those Commodores are going to be sucking air, and, Georgia's going to be trucking. So that's kind of why I think it'll be a close game early. I think Georgia will physically wear them down, probably win that game by 3 touchdowns. Dante Rivers says Vandy's not going to score. Now, careful there, Dante. I will say this about Vandy. I think Georgia's defense will make big plays, but Vandy has 3 of the best skill position players in the country. They really do. They got a great tailback. They got a great tight end. They got a great receiver. I don't know if they got anybody who can throw them the ball, but I think Vandy would score about 10. My game, and I wasn't ready to do this. I'm getting way ahead of myself. I would say my prediction would be 41-10. That'd be my prediction for the opener right now. Jimmy Richardson, does Georgia have a weakness at tight end? Jimmy, I wouldn't call it a weakness. I would say that they don't have the depth that they had last year. I like Charlie Warner. He's improved. He's a year further away from that broken leg. I don't think Charlie was really 100% at the start of last year. We know Charlie can do both. He can block and catch. I think he's still that guy. I know he's another Senior Bowl guy. But I think Eli Wolf is going to be a surprise. Now, he hadn't caught a lot of balls at Tennessee, but really nobody caught a lot of balls at Tennessee because the quarterback was on his back a lot the last 2 years with horrible offensive line play. But Eli is the fastest of the Georgia tight ends, and I think he really slides into that Isaac Nauta role well. Now, it remains to be seen if he can perform like Isaac did in the big games. Isaac was quite a clutch player and made some big-time plays. I know that Eli's got the hands, and I know that James Coley and Kirby Smart have talked very complimentary of him, and I know he's worked very hard for this opportunity. He's got a brother that's a tight end in the NFL, so Eli gets it. Eli was a record-setting receiver in high school, so he runs great routes. The question was going to be if he blocks sufficiently, and so far he has answered the bell. So while I wouldn't call tight end a strength, I don't think I'd call it a weakness. Don't forget John Fitzpatrick. He's a sophomore, and Charlie says he's making a lot more plays. So I think you have 3 quality tight ends there. I don't think any of them are future NFL Pro Bowlers. I do think that a couple of them could play in the NFL, though. Nashville Jinx, John. I don't even know why we're talking about Jinx. I'm going to pretend that question didn't happen. You don't want to deliberate. You don't want to talk too long on Jinx. You start talking yourself into things. What do I think the biggest weakness is? Mitchell Rushing wants to know. I think it's still the synchronization of the pass game. I really do. And that's not a knock on Jake. And it's you know what? It's a knock on the receivers. That's what it is. It's a knock on the receivers. The fact that they weren't ready for Scrimmage 1, the fact that Kirby Smart is saying that George Pickens still needs to learn what to do. The fact that Don Blaylock was running third team and not second team or first team with all the hype that he came in with. Listen, you're saying, man, that is really hypercritical, Mike. Well, yeah, guess what? Zero margin for error, folks. We're talking about trying to win a national championship at Georgia if you're a Georgia fan, right? Now, check out this Pickens catch. This is the stuff that just makes you salivate. You go, holy cow, right? If this guy can do this, yes, but here, can he line up in the right place? Can he read the audible? Is he on time for meetings? Is he doing everything? People look at this. It's in the NFL. The guys don't just come here to play football, and not at Georgia at least. They got classes they got to go to. They've got a strength and conditioning program like they've never had. Morning runs, meetings, time allocation. It doesn't come easy. I know this. Listen, I was 18 in the military. I had drill sergeants jumping down my throat, and I still had to learn how to do things. So I know what these young men are going through away from home for the first time, trying to allocate time, trying to learn a playbook that's that thick, trying to make sure they're on time for every single meeting. I don't know how many alarms they've got set on their phone, probably 8 or 10, because they're afraid they're going to miss something. I mean, life's coming at them at 110 miles an hour, and we're sitting here, and I'm telling you that it's disappointing that George Pickens doesn't know all his audibles. And you said, Mike, that's crazy. Well, it is, but listen, I don't hate the play or hate the game. They open on August 31st. Don't get mad at me. I can't help it that George Pickens only has fall camp to be ready for August 31st, and that Georgia runs a pro-style offense that requires a lot of reads and the quarterback and the receiver to be on the same page. Listen, this is demanding. This is a demanding place. And I've said this before on radio program. People ask me about Georgia when I do these shows around the country. I said, look, I don't know, what their local program's like, but I know that when I compare Georgia to other programs that I've covered, the demands here are as high as anywhere. And I thought Michigan State had a lot of demands, right? Mark D'Antonio, disciplinarian, all that kind of stuff. I thought they realized they had no margin for error because they didn't have talent, right? Georgia has no margin for error because it's a national championship or bust season. Now, people can sit back and say, oh, no, it's not. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Listen, you tell me what game you're going to be okay with Georgia losing right now. You fill in the blank. You say this out loud to yourself. I'll be okay if Georgia loses to fill in the blank. I want to know who that team is because I don't think any of you are going to be okay with Georgia losing any games. I don't think you're going to go, well, if they get to the championship game and lose to Clemson, I'll be okay with it because Trevor Lawrence is a heck of a... No, you're not thinking that. You're not thinking, well, if they get to Alabama and this time they come, and they don't give up. No, if they lose to Alabama, you're going to jump off a bridge. Obviously not literally, but to my point, you get it. You're not going to say, well, if they lose to Auburn but still get to the SEC title game, I'm good. No, you're not okay losing on the Plains. You're not. If they lose to A&M because it's a trap, no, you're not. So zero margin for error. So that's why Kirby Smart is having convulsions after the first scrimmage when everything's not perfect because he gets it. He's the one that told us this. And by the way, hats off to Kirby Smart for saying 24-5 isn't good enough. I don't know that if there's another coach in America that would say that a 24-5 record over the last 2 years, that averaging 12 wins per season isn't good enough. I don't know of another coach in America that would say that. You talk about setting yourself up for failure. Kirby doesn't care, though, right? Like the honey badger, right? Kirby don't care. I mean, Kirby has a one-track mind. He's about national championship. He's about do more, right? He's about autograph day that lasts 1 hour. He's about moving Jacksonville so he gets that other recruiting weekend like everybody else in the SEC. Kirby is about scheduling better teams in the future so that Georgia has a better profile to make the playoff. Every move the guy makes is about winning a national championship and nothing else. So when we talk about this high standard, when I tell you zero margin for error, I'm not telling you anything that the guys in that football building aren't hearing from their head coach. That's how Georgia thinks. And they understand that they have to meet these high demands, these ridiculous expectations early to be effective. I've compared it to like special forces in the military. To be a Georgia player, I mean, the days of, we'll bring him in and we'll work him into shape. No, you better show up in shape here because you see Kirby practices in the afternoons. He don't care who you are. There's not a line, okay, all the fat guys, you go over there and run. We know we're not going to. No. Everybody runs the same. Everybody has high expectations. There's no slack here at this place. It's not for everyone. That's the other thing. It's not for everyone. All you got to do, look at the transfer portal. It's not for everyone. Not everybody can hack it. Not everybody can wait their turn in line. Not everybody can carry the lunch pail like Brian Herring has carried and wait his time. Okay, when I talked about him earlier, that's what I'm talking about. Not everybody can come to work every single day knowing that they're not going to get the glory. It's not for everyone to buy in. But Kirby has that going on at Georgia right now. That's the best thing Georgia has going. Yes, talent, but buy-in. Those players believe in their head coach. They're committed to that one goal. They know what's on the table. They understand the expectation. They understand the standard. So you asked me, gosh, I don't even remember the question. Let me go back to the question. Oh, it was receivers. Yeah, and the reason that they're my biggest concern, and the reason is because they're the youngest. So the other guys are experienced, and they're used to the standard, and they're more up to speed. Receivers my biggest question mark because they're not up to speed, because there's a lot of young guys you're counting on. Because you're going to count on Don Blaylock before it's over with. Trust me, he's talented. You're going to count on George Pickens for sure. You're going to count on transfer Lawrence Cager from Miami to learn the playbook. You're going to count on Tyler Simmons to catch the ball better than he's ever caught the ball. You're going to count on Demetrius Robertson to stay physical and tough enough to make big plays out of the slot. You're going to count on Matt Landers to start to have that sort of consistency so that those flashes become the regular standard of play. You're going to count on those guys to make plays when the going gets tough. It may not come against Vandy. It certainly won't come against Arkansas State or Murray State. I doubt it comes against Notre Dame. I don't even think it comes against Tennessee. But sooner or later, you're going to need those receivers to make big plays to win a football game, and they need to be ready. So that's my biggest area of concern. John Shaw wants to know, how did the Gators get the number 8 ranking? Shake my head. Here's how. They blasted Florida State, and they beat Michigan in a New Year's Six Bowl. And you're not going to want to hear this, but Georgia did not win a New Year's Six Bowl. Georgia did not show up in a New Year's Six Bowl. Georgia did not show up, period, to play Texas. Now, you can excuse Georgia and say, well, their hearts were broken. They lost to Alabama. They should have been in the playoff. Don't get me started on the playoff discussion. I'll go on another hour just talking about how Georgia got ripped off. Georgia fans don't want to hear it. College football playoff advocates don't want to hear it. They got ripped off. Their hearts were torn out. That's why they didn't show up. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but that's what happened. Florida, meanwhile, beat the living daylights out of Michigan, that everyone thinks is still got Bo Schembechler as a head coach going to the Rose Bowl every year. They don't. Michigan hasn't even played in the doggone Big Ten championship game. You want to talk about a program's image and people just giving them high rankings for, just because they're Michigan. And listen, I get it better than anybody. They got great facilities. I love their uniforms. I love the helmet. But they don't deserve. Who was it? Nancy Armour from the USA Today wrote that Jim Harbaugh owns college football. There goes her credibility. Still hasn't gotten it back, right? So, but Florida dominated them in the Peach Bowl, and they knocked out Florida State, another program that's been down. But still, when I say Florida State, we all kind of get the warm and fuzzies and remember how good they were at one point. They may be on the comeback trail, but that's to answer your question why Florida finished last season strong, and that's what resonates with people. How did you finish last season? To me, that's why Georgia's ranking number 3 is so impressive. I can't remember the last time I saw a team ranked in the top 5 in the country in a preseason poll that lost their last 2 games of the previous season. That's the other thing to remember here. For all this talk about Georgia football, how great it is, the Bulldogs are riding a 2-game losing streak coming into this year. I mean, let that sink in. It doesn't seem like it when I watch them practice. There's certainly nobody's, dragging their feet, hanging their head. They've moved past it. But from the outside in, for the people that don't get to deal with Kirby Smart and players on a daily basis, they see Georgia's team lost their last 2 games. That's what they see. Let's see what other questions we got here. Just do more, Danny Carter says. Man, that is it. Kirby is, when he came up with that slogan, I said, oh boy, that's cliche. But he's lived up to it. He's not joking around, folks. Kirby doesn't play when it comes to the demands on these players. And I got to tell you, that video last night with Matthew Bowling, I hope you've all seen it. Jeff Sentell did a aggregation on it for us on DawgNation, where Kirby, remember the silly Olympics or whatever when they had the players going against the coaches a couple weeks ago, and so then they saved the 4x1, right? So this was in the works from the beginning. I mean, Kirby totally sets up the team. I love this. I mean, you can feel the happiness and energy just watching this. He's saying to these guys, who wants to go do the 4x1 instead of finish running these gassers? Well, of course, the players are like, yeah, we get out of this work. So now the players, they dominated the coaches in the first 4x1 they did. So the players are thinking they're going to blow away the coaches on the track again. They're thinking that this is going to be great and that they're going to beat the coaches in a 4x1. And Kirby's going to name out the guys from the team that are running and throw the coaches out there. What the players don't know is that the fastest freshman in the country is going to anchor the leg. This is great. You see Richard LeCount running out there. Rat Trap Richard is Kirby calls him. The guy that Kirby always loves to give a hard time to is Richard LeCount. Obviously, he loves him. It's his first recruit, and that's why I think he likes to tease Richard. But he's got Richard so set up for this. Richard's going to run the anchor leg. not knowing he's going to have to run it against this guy, Matthew Bowling. So the team is salivating. They can't wait to get on the track and run against the coaching staff. Little do they know that Bowling is going to run the anchor leg. So here's the start of it. They put a slow guy out there first from the team, and the players get it. They're like, oh, look at this. The coaches think, because this guy starts out that we're not going to be able to catch up. Well, here they come. The players are blown by the coaching staff, and everybody's getting excited because they're building a big lead on the coaching staff, and they think they're going to – and look who's coming out to the track, right? So this is great. If you're Richard LeCount right now, you got to be going, you got to be kidding me. I got to run against this guy. But look at the lead that he's got. And LeCount is fast. LeCount is one of the 4 or 5 fastest players on the Georgia football team. This is 100 yards, folks. And Bowling just blows by him here like LeCount's nothing. Now, the fun, and LeCount, even though any player would have got run down, I don't know that there's a player Georgia could have been out there on that final leg. But for LeCount, he's just got to shake his head and say, man, Kirby got me again. And that's the kind of special and fun stuff. You see the way these players are all celebrating. That's a good feeling, man. When you're at the end of fall camp and you can put a bow on it like that, let me tell you, that's what makes Kirby Smart a great head coach. I've heard of other cool tactics coaches have done, pranks they've pulled to keep the guys loose, to make fall camp fun. But this one tops it off. I mean, this is really fun because it involves the track team. Look at Kirby. He's having a blast with it. This is the value of having a 43-year-old head coach. He's not that far removed from being a player himself when you get right down to it. You talk about the turn of the century. That wasn't really that long ago, at least not to a guy like me. So Kirby enjoyed it. Look at the team. They're loving it. This makes their day. This makes Georgia, for all the hard work they do, for all those meetings and all those alarms I was telling you they got set, all that commitment to excellence, that zero margin for error, you need a day like this to laugh and smile and have fun and enjoy. And for Kirby to be able to put a bow on fall camp with a moment like that and share it with the fans. I mean, I'm a media reporter. I'm not a part of the program, and I enjoyed it. It made me laugh out loud. I got a kick out of it. I can't wait for the next time we get Richard LeCount and I can ask him about that moment. Because LeCount he loves the way Kirby gigs him. You get a feeling there aren't many other people on this earth that get the best of Richard LeCount, but Kirby Smart does. And it's just one of those fun, magical relationships, and that was another neat part of it. Let's take a look here. You're right, Daniel Aldrich. Kirby has brought Georgia to another level. Ryan Greathouse recruit Matthew Bowling for return specialist. Here's the thing. He would really have to want to do that. I covered Christian Coleman up there at Tennessee who wanted to play football. A kid from Atlanta, just was too small. And now he's making a fortune as one of the fastest men on the planet. And let's circle that day when Christian Coleman runs against Matthew Bowling. That day's coming. Those are probably the 2 fastest sprinters in the U.S. right now. I'm not a track expert. Who knows? Justin Gatlin's probably out there still chugging away somewhere. But Christian Coleman and Bowling, man, I would love to see that race head-to-head. What track star needs to be on? You could see him at wide receiver. Well, Whitney, right now you need to have guys that can catch the ball. It's more than about just being fast. It's about knowing your routes. It's about knowing your plays. It's about downfield blocking. I will say that in the video that I did on Zamir White, the most recently, I put out a tweet. I don't know if y'all follow me on Twitter, at Mike Griffith 32. I put out a tweet and I said, can anybody tackle Zamir White one-on-one? I mean, I was serious about that. Now some Alabama fans, they claim they got some linebackers. We'll see. That game will happen. We'll see it. If Alabama can get by LSU, we'll see it. But the point of the matter is, George Pickens was in that video too as a blocker for Don Blaylock. And Pickens threw down a block. Listen, Pickens is a man-child. This guy has a chance to be so special. And when you heard him compared to A.J. Green, we all kind of, oh, yeah, sure. Here's the next Green. Here's the next David Pollock. No. He really is that good. Now, does he have everything else? Is he going to know the playbook? Is he going to put in that extra time with Jake Fromm? I don't know that. I don't know what's happening over there behind closed doors. That's what needs to happen. Does George realize that a national championship could come down to how quickly he learns the offense and how well he converts? You say, well, Mike, that's crazy. Is it? You look at Georgia's last 2 seasons, we're talking about one player making a difference. If DeAndre Walker doesn't go out of that game with an injury against Alabama in the SEC title game, Georgia wins that game and is in the college football playoff. I don't know that they go on to beat Clemson. I can't tell you that. But they're in the playoff if DeAndre Walker doesn't get hurt. The year before, you don't need to talk about the year before. We all know there were a couple plays. One player could have made a difference. One player can make a difference. Billy Cloud wants to know, what about Tommy Bush? Well, to me, what I've seen is he's flashing some highlights that Georgia's put out, but the head coach hasn't talked about him. And I guess I would just say that. When we ask Kirby about receivers, he talks about guys that are making a difference. Right now, my answer to you, Billy, on Tommy Bush is I don't know that he gets on the bus. I don't know if he's going to be on that 70 that traveled to Vanderbilt. I've got a story up on that right now. If you go to DawgNation right now, when you play an SEC road game, you can only bring 70 guys on the road. And you can kind of go through it position by position and say, okay, like, for example, my notes on it. You bring 3 quarterbacks. You bring 6 running backs. You bring 4 tight ends, maybe 3. Last year they would travel 10 wide receivers. Tommy would probably be the 10th right now. Are they going to travel 10 again? When we asked Kirby that, he pointed out, remember last year's receivers, one of them, Jason Stanley, were terrific on special teams. I don't know that he feels as strongly about how much wide receivers are going to contribute on special teams. Hence, maybe you don't travel as many. Maybe you only bring 8 or 9, and that would be bad news for Tommy Bush. You maybe bring 10 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen. How many linebackers do you bring? Maybe you bring more this year because you do have so many talented young linebackers in there. Guys like a Nolan Smith, an incoming transfer, Jermaine Johnson. Robert Beal's been impressive. Adam Anderson, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall, Tresman Marshall. Nate McBride. Does Nate McBride get on the bus? These are guys that are going to be heavy special teams contributors, right? So maybe you bring a few more linebackers rather than receivers. And that's what Kirby said. His comment was that the last 5 guys that get on the bus are going to be great special teams players. So while they're still tinkering and refining positions and depth charts and things like that in position groups, a lot of the focus this week is going to be getting special teams set and finding out who's going to win those special teams positions. And as you know, Kirby will use great players on special teams. Kenny McIntosh, circling back to that. I talked about how he idolized Sony Michel. The good news there is Kenny knows Sony played special teams. Kenny told me last summer, before he even came here, that he was ready to play special teams at Georgia and do whatever the coaches want him to do. So he gets it. Having those older brothers that are in other programs, whether it was RJ that played at Miami or Deion that started at Notre Dame and now is at Washington State, his brothers have told him, yeah, look, man, no, special teams, no joke. Go all out on it. It's what's going to get you on the field. Coaches are going to love it. So you kind of wonder how many guys from every position group are going to go as you make out that 70-man roster in your mind, who Kirby might bring and not bring. Now, what we don't know is the health status of a Julian Rochester and a David Marshall. Will they be on the bus? If they're healthy, they certainly will. But if they can't play, then maybe that opens up 2 spots for a couple of other guys. Maybe Notori Johnson gets on there, as well as maybe another receiver or another linebacker. More looking at your questions here. They go against the number 1 offense. Iron sharpens iron. You're talking about the defensive line being better than people think. Kyle Norton, I agree with that. I think they've had a really good, strong camp, even without Julian Rochester and David Marshall being 100%. I think a lot of those guys have impressed. Kirby Smart, Mikal Carter. Today we'll talk to Michael Barnett. Again, these are more lunch pail guys that get it done without much fanfare. Those guys in the trenches ultimately make a difference. I think Alabama and Clemson have proven that you've got to have great defensive line play to win a national championship. Georgia had great defensive line play 2 years ago when I still believe the Bulldogs were the best team in the country in 2017. Best team doesn't always win with this playoff because of the seedings and where they send teams and all that stuff. I'm still trying to figure out why Georgia had to go all the way out to Los Angeles and Alabama got to go to New Orleans and play a poor Clemson team. And it had a bye, not having to play in the SEC title game in 2017. So will Mathis be cleared anytime soon? I don't know. Forgive me if I butcher your name here. Kiami Matt wants to know. I don't think that Dwan is going to be cleared by Vanderbilt. Certainly. Remember, Dwan had essentially skull surgery, had brain surgery. I was there. I got the call. Let me see. I want to say it was May 23rd. It was on that Thursday, May 23rd. Yes. When I got the call and I saw that Detroit area code come up and the news, and another guy whose home that I went in January, DawgNation, going into the Dwan Mathis home in January after the Sugar Bowl for a next generation visit. And I must admit, I had a video with Dwan about this season, a 25-minute video, and it hasn't played. And the reason why is because he's talking about the season And I just don't think it's fair to play that video when he's still going through this rehab. And, to turn back the clock on you a little bit, it was on May 23rd that Dwan had been experiencing some severe headache symptoms. And he went to Ron Corson, who is Georgia's trainer. Not just any trainer, by the way. Ron is a globally renowned doctor and team trainer. And Ron was able to diagnose this quickly and understand this is not just a headache. This is not to take 2 aspirins and call me. And this was not what it was. This was serious enough to bring him to Piedmont Regional Medical Center. And the doctors there took over and sprang into action. And, within hours of complaining to a headache, Dwan was having emergency brain surgery to remove what they believe was a fluid buildup, like a cyst on his brain. This was somewhat of a genetic problem, but it was exaggerated and brought on by climate change. Dwan had gone back to Michigan at the start of May when the players, finish their spring term. They get to go home for a little while. Temperatures in the 50s and 60s. He'd come back to Athens. Things are blooming. The temperatures 80s and 90s. And so that kind of brought on some exaggerated symptoms. It led to the fluid buildup that was putting pressure on his brain. And so they had to open up his skull and remove that cyst. And I'll tell you what, the way that Georgia handled this, and I don't know how many of the stories that you've read that I wrote about this, talking with Terrence Mathis, Dwan's father, he was just at times in tears talking to me over how well Georgia handled this situation. He was I remember he was in tears telling me that Kirby Smart had treated his son as though he were his own son. He said, Mike, I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. Coach Kirby is the one calling me. He's flying me down there. He's flying my family down there immediately. They're going to have a helicopter ready if we need it. They're going to have a police escort ready to get us to Athens to make sure that we're there for Dwan. He said, he just kept saying, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. You were right about George. I said, dude, I'm telling you, Kirby is like all out. Because remember Dwan Mathis' situation. I mean, here's a guy who thought he was committed. He was going to Ohio State. He thinks he's going to Ohio State. He thinks he's going to commit and sign in the early signing period with Ohio State until about a week before signing day, when Dwan figures out via social media that a guy named Justin Fields might be going to Ohio State. He calls him up. He asks Ohio State, "Hey man, is this no, you're our guy. You are our guy, Justin who? Nope, Dwan, you're our guy." And meantime, he gets a hold of Georgia, and Georgia says, "Yeah, we think Justin might be leaving." I mean, it's all out there. We're all writing it. I mean, Justin said he was leaving during. So Dwan now, it's the 11th hour, and Ohio State's getting ready to add Justin Fields to their roster. That's not what he signed up for. Now, Ryan Day never told him that. He told me he went into signing day literally before he had two pieces of paper ready to sign on an early signing day. One was for Georgia, one was from Ohio State. And he called Ryan Day, the Ohio State coach, before he went in that room and asked him if they were talking to Justin Fields. And Dwan told me that the Ohio State coach denied that. And then he talked to a Georgia coach, and the Georgia coach said, that's what we believe is happening. And he had to make a call. He had to make a decision. Who did he trust? Now, he'd been to Georgia and visited Georgia before, but back when he visited Georgia, the dogs were loaded. Not Jake Fromm and Justin Fields. Eason hadn't even transferred. So he looked at that depth chart and said, well, I love Georgia. That was a great visit, but man, I'm never going to go on the field there. 3 guys ahead of me. He had to make gut check time. Who's he going to believe? Right? He signed with Georgia. So he didn't have this long recruiting process with numerous visits to get to know the coaching staff, to get to know all the teammates, to understand the culture, to have all the fans follow him on Twitter and write great things about him after every game that he played. He didn't have that. Georgia was the 11th hour ad, so he didn't understand the Georgia family. And his dad didn't understand it. His dad was talking to me about it because he knew I was from Michigan. We got a mutual friend up there in Michigan. Hey, man, what is Dwan getting into down there? I said, listen, I'll tell you what my impression is that Kirby Smart doesn't play. If Kirby tells you everything that Kirby said that I've seen, Kirby's delivered. That's what I can tell you, Terrence. That's what I know, man. And that's what I witnessed last year. All I can tell you is this program is locked in. Do I like Athens? Yes. Is it hot? It's very hot. So be ready for that. I was honest. This is what I know. I'm going to tell you the truth. But until push comes to shove, you don't really find out about a program until there's adversity. You always hear Kirby Smart talk about that, how you really don't find out about your team until you got adversity. The Mathis family really didn't find out about Georgia. And believe me, I'm sure they would have been just fine not having to go through the emergency. But when this happened, the way that Kirby Smart and Ron Corson handled this literally left Terrence Mathis in tears. He was so pleased. He was so impressed. He was so thankful to God that his son was at the right place. He doesn't believe that his son would have been treated better anywhere. He doesn't believe it's possible. So the Mathis family right now is focused on the recovery. They're thankful for Georgia. They appreciate Georgia. Dwan has told a story to other recruits around the country. This is testimony. This is when you find out about a program. Dwan was a guy that probably wasn't going to play much this year, okay, in all reality. But for Kirby Smart to take the lead on this and to be the one, Kirby to leave meetings, to take phone calls, to get up out of coaches' meetings for a third-string quarterback that had only been on the roster for 3 months, that told the Mathis family everything. That tells college football recruits everything. This is what Georgia is, folks. So the Dwan Mathis story is a very special story in the Georgia culture. Now that we're getting into the season and we're looking at the depth chart and we're saying Fromm, Bennett, Nathan Priestley, and maybe Dwan's not on that bus to go to Vanderbilt, listen, he's still on the sidelines. He's still a part of this program, and he's still rehabbing. And maybe I told you a lot more than you really asked, but that's part of the story that I want you to know. I've tried to write that in several stories, and I don't know how well it's conveyed, but that's the story of Dwan Mathis. That's where he's at. So as much as I personally can't wait for the day that Dwan gets cleared to take a hit, he's out there doing reps. He's got a helmet on. He's got a uniform on. He's going through drills. It's unbelievable. Piedmont is unbelievable. I don't know if you know it. It's one of the top 100 hospitals in the country. The job that they did, it was unbelievable. The fact that this guy's on a football field, what are we talking about, May 23rd, where we May, June, July, 3 months? Within 3 months of having his skull cut open, this guy's on a football field running through drills. No, he's not taking contact, but look at that young man out there competing athletically within 3 months, right? That's Piedmont at work there. That's the rehab they put him through for a month. Now, there'll be a time when all this will come out. There'll be a bigger story, I have no doubt. But right now, the story is still unfolding. Dwan's comeback continues. The family is happy. They're thanking their prayers for Georgia, Kirby Smart, God, and the doctors and what they did for Dwan Mathis. And so while Dwan may not dress for that game, you better believe he'll be there somewhere. And I know the Georgia fans will be following him. But as far as a medical update on Dwan, right now, we're all still kind of waiting and hoping for the best. Listen, that's about as feel-good a story as I've been able to write this summer. And I think it's a good place to end today. I got to drive back to Athens, get to practice, and talk to some of the players that will be available. Look for stories, Caden Mays, Tyler Clark, Jamari Salyer, Michael Barnett. Those are the players that are going to talk today. We'll ask them some questions about the line play that you guys brought up. I apologize I wasn't able to get to more of your questions. I started talking about the running backs. I started talking about Dwan Mathis and Kirby Smart, and, man, the time got away. But next Tuesday, I promise, I will answer more questions. I'll do a better job. If you want to ask questions online here, I'll jump back in and answer them later in the day. And I'm also going to try and do a mailbag. And also, if you could follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32, I put links to all my work up there. For right now, though, I got to get out of here, man. Everybody, have a great Tuesday. It's game week for Florida and Miami. It's going to be interesting to watch that game. And then it's time for the Dogs the following week, man. I can't wait. Everybody, have a great Tuesday. Thanks for Ingles. Appreciate it.